Hey everybody, welcome in. It's Tuesday. And I confess, I jinxed it yesterday. Yesterday morning on DCA, I said, Bitcoin price normally falls after the conference. And I was so surprised it didn't do that. Well, here we are. It just did that. And there's a lot of reasons why, and we'll get into that, as well as a couple of very positive signs, some negative stuff, and something that flipped on chain, which meant our TABI model, remember it spiked to orange last week, was back down to yellow, and I will explain why today, looking at some key metrics that will explain exactly what's going on. Now, the Bitcoin ETF flows were very positive. Blackrock again spent over 200 million on Bitcoin in a day. Grayscale continues the bleed. What else? Fear and Greed, I think it's 66 or 67. And yeah, 67, I think it is. But let's jump in to the story. This is called whale stacking and not financial advice. And shout out to everybody on Patreon as well. For the win, I've been part of the Patreon for several years. Awesome. Patreon is now 3 years old. So actually the channel and Patreon is like 3 years and 5 months old, I think. I don't know. I didn't start Patreon until later. I didn't. Anyway, let's jump into the numbers. First of all, Bitcoin monthly returns. Everything is red across the board, but still, Bitcoin is up 5.9% for July. I'll show you some interesting charts as well that show you things aren't quite as bad as they appear. But Bitcoin is literally at the exact same level it was before the Bitcoin conference started on Thursday last week. So again, all is not lost. But if you look at the whole stock market, everything is red today. It's just nasty day. Let's get into some news, which is kind of interesting. First of all, from Hey Apollo, BlackRock keeps stacking. They buy 3,050 Bitcoin and nothing stops this train. They have never, ever had a red day. They are on a mission and it's not stopping. In fact, it's only going to accelerate from here. We need to look at some where the supply is going to come from in the near future. There are some sources of supply right now. I covered yesterday that Mr. 100 took a dump. And the Mt. Gox things are in flow, but we'll dig more into that in a second. Also, a little bit about regulation and all the stuff that's going on with SAB 121, which you covered in detail. This is from Caitlin Long. Someone asked me to speculate about which banks the SEC had given special exceptions to SAB 121. Well, Bloomberg article said several large banks got them. And all of a sudden, guess what happened? One of the big banks, it's not, what is it? They don't watch what they say, watch what they do. Goldman was anti-crypto for the longest time. And guess what? They just entered the Bitcoin race. Another big bank. Goldman Sachs CEO now says, oh, guess what? Bitcoin has a legitimate store of value use case. All of a sudden, slowly then suddenly, there is no denying Bitcoin. It's a cockroach you cannot kill. Embrace or die. All the stuff you've heard me say for years. And here we go. Goldman is in. Not many are left out in the cold now. And Morgan Stanley are coming out with their ETF, I think, real soon too. Now, yesterday's scare did rattle the markets a lot. And that was when the U.S. wallets moved a little bit. And the U.S. government has a little over 200,000 Bitcoin. But maybe there is a theory out there that the U.S. government will try sell Bitcoin before maybe somebody new gets into office. Then he has no Bitcoin to hold in a strategic reserve. This from Autism Capital. So we did see Bitcoin on the move. Probably some of it has hit the markets. I don't know yet for sure, but it's probably going OTC, unlike Germany that just went straight to Coinbase or somewhere. Anyway, that did take us down a little bit. Bitcoin price, as I speak right now, is literally 65,800. We breached 70,000 for a minute there yesterday, and now it's right back down to earth. I am cold. Thank you so much. Let's get into Russia as well. The lower house of Russian parliament will consider a law that permits making international payments via cryptocurrency. And the central bank governor, Elvira Nabiulani, I don't know the name, said they're looking to move money across borders using crypto before the end of 2024. And the U.S. and its allies have imposed innumerable sanctions on Russia and individuals and entities ever since all that happened 3 years ago. Hard to believe it's 3 years already. But here we are. Now, I have been talking as well for years about what I call the petro-Bitcoin, a replacement for the petrodollar. So things like oil can be sold for Bitcoin, and we know Russia is also mining Bitcoin on the side too. This could be interesting. I know the Western governments that impose sanctions will not like this news, but hey, again, what can you do? There's no CEO you can call. And apparently this law is going into force now in September, as reported by Reuters, and that will be a big deal. September is not too far away, ladies and gentlemen. Basically a month. We just got to get through August first. So let's get into some of the charts. Got some really cool charts for you all today. First of all, TABI, the top and bottom indicator. We all got a bit nervous last week. It flipped to orange, which means steady back on. And just so you know, this is a composite scoring index of 21 different on-chain indicators with different weights, of course. That's what a composite score is. When we get to orange, that's when you kind of stop stacking. And I did yield that warning last week. But the question arose, why? Why did it suddenly go orange? And then why did it suddenly go back? So one of the reasons it went orange was because of large whale movements. It was driven by Mt. Gox, etc. But let's dig into why it's actually retraced back. Again, this is a dynamic model. It changes every single day based on data. Two things that drove it down again back to yellow, which means back to stacking time, is the NVTS Tanked. And that's basically the net value of the transactions on chain. And the other thing that tanked too is the pi cycle fell too. That's a combination of two different moving averages. These are the reasons for it going down. Some, of course, are related to price. The pi cycle moving averages change as the price falls, or if the price is stable for a long period of time, and a lot of other stuff is going on. So that's the reason. We're going to dig more into all of the 21 metrics in a future video, and we'll do a refresh on exactly where we are. But things are a little bit different this time because of movements and whale stacking, which we'll talk about as well. This shows you the third element of the top and bottom indicator is the amount of large mover flows, large size of basically whales when they move stuff. And what's incredible about this, the whales now, just over the past week, are stacking more than they have since 2022. So this is also an interesting sign. This is the topic for today. This spike got my interest. And not only are the ETFs like Blackrock buying a lot and Grayscale's dumping off, but they kind of net each other out to a large extent. But there's other stuff happening behind the scenes. First of all, before we get to the detail, let's look at this. This is kind of interesting from DAR, Digital Asset Research. It's their chart. I could have done it myself, but I use theirs because it's so easy. We had 4 down weeks. They're the 4 red candles. And then subsequent to that, we know that June was kind of ugly and July has been better so far. But 4 down and now we have 4 up. And yes, the weekly close was barely green for the 3rd week, but now we have our 4th consecutive week of green candles, and that is a positive movement over time. It's the first time this has happened since the March top. And we also managed to close above the 0.75 level on the weekly downtrend. So next up, monthly close on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. So we'll see what that does. And this is interesting for many to follow too. Sorry about that. I have no idea how that phone call came in. Anyway, let's talk about Mt. Gox. This is having a little bit of an impact on the market too. This is from Solana Floor. Glassnode reports 59,000 Bitcoin of Mt. Gox's 142,000 has already been distributed to creditors. An additional 79,000 will be redistributed soon, possibly to long-term investors, which may reduce the selling pressure. So Mt. Gox held not only Bitcoin for retail investors, but also for some funds and fund managers. And they know what's up with the space. And that means they probably will be less inclined to sell than retail. Now let's look at another thing. I shared a chart, I think, on last week from Crypto Quant, but here, this shows you the actual, this is from Bitcoin News, that now nearly half of the 141,686 Bitcoin, worth about 9.4 billion, owed to Mt. Gox creditors, has been distributed. But most creditors appear to be hodling, and that is from on-chain data from Kraken and a little bit from Bitstamp as well. You can see here the green is the transfer of 50,000 to Kraken and another 10,000 to Bitstamp. That's 60,000 in total, so nearly half. And the orange is the balance, and they believe that this orange balance that is yet to be distributed will go to investment firms, which would be less inclined to dump right now because they know we're still maybe halfway through the bull market. So we'll watch this carefully. Now, let's look at some hodl ratios too from on-chain data from Crypto Quant. And the cohort of investors holding coins from 3 months to 1 year continues to grow rapidly. And the hodl strategy is now a priority for this group at this stage. So these are people, again, that got in the last 12 weeks to 1 year. The 6 to 12 month is the purple, and the 3 to 6 month is the yellow. The yellow is growing the most. So people are still stacking out there, but there's more. There's a big stacking cohort right now, all of a sudden jumping in. As I showed you in this spike from the top and bottom indicator, biggest spike for whale stacking in 2 years. And by the way, that took me aback. And then we have this, more hodling. And then we had this, 4 whales in the last 24 hours purchased 6,000 Bitcoin. And they bought them on centralized exchanges. One withdrew about 4,500 from Binance, including, this is after the 3,500 after the price dropped. Another group bought 1,400 from Bitfinex, adding to a previous 4,000 Bitcoin purchase. So again, the whales are stacking. This is on-chain data from, I think, Ash Crypto that shows you that someone bought 4,500 Bitcoin worth over $300 million on Binance alone. And when retail was panicking, whales bought the dip again. Now, not all whales bought the dip. Mr. 100 sold 2020 Bitcoin, if I recall, over the last 2 or 3 days. So they maybe got wind of the US moving some Bitcoin. I don't know. But the others are buying, and Blackrock is buying too. Now, let's check in on where we are in the cycle performance. And a lot of people, this also gets me sometimes. A lot of people are kind of frustrated that we're not at $100,000 already. But just to put things in perspective, the bottom of Bitcoin was 15.5 a little over a year and a half ago. We're up 400% already. And this is where we are based on historic cycles. So let me try break this chart down a little bit for you. So we are here. That's the black line, the 2022 cycle when it began. And it starts from the global cycle low. If we look at the Genesis 2011 cycle, that went bonkers real fast. But it's going from a very small base. Then the 2011 to 2015 cycle is in orange, also higher. Then we have the 2018 to 2022 cycle. That is the green, which kind of was a manipulated cycle. So take that with a big grain of salt. And then we have the 2015 to 2018 cycle. The tealy color kind of in the middle. That is the one that is most similar to this cycle right now. Everybody's saying that is the analog to where we are this cycle. So the question is, what happens next? We'll see. Typically, things really kick off like August timeframe, month 19, month 20, month 21. But we shall see if history repeats. But bear in mind, Bitcoin is still up 400% from the bottom. Is anybody with the courage to buy under 20K? They did very, very well. Let's talk about some other stuff too. Grayscale tanked 10%. We had some big movements in stocks, and people are very confused about them. This is from James Seyfert. Why is Grayscale Bitcoin Trust down 10% in pre-market? Well, the 10% of the value is going into their Grayscale Mini Bitcoin Trust. And the record date for the spinoff is today. Bitcoin is expected to begin trading or BTC. Their hashtag is begin to trade, expected to trade tomorrow. And that is basically what happens. They're moving 10% of the bag, which is impacting the actual price of the actual fund. And that's why it's falling 10%. But there was more confusion out there in the marketplace today because some people got excited when they saw a company called Metaplanet jump up 600%. But no, it didn't. It actually fell 26% because Metaplanet did a reverse 1-for-10 stock split. That means if you had 10 shares, you now have 1. This is normally not a good thing in the markets. Companies do this to try show like their asset has a little more value if the dollar value is too low, or so they don't become a penny stock under $1. And that's why they do this. But this confused a lot of people in the market. So don't get too excited about Metaplanet. Actually, net, it was down and the market reacts badly to negative stock splits. Just think about the logic of it. Imagine you have 100 shares. You wake up the next day, you got 10 shares. You're going to be upset. You're going to feel like you're robbed. That's why it's down 26%, not up 600%. So beware of that too. And also, a little bit of history. 11 years ago today, this from the Bitcoin historian, was the last chance, the last time ever that Bitcoin was under $100. And apparently many believe it's going to 100,000 soon. So imagine 11 years ago, if you had the courage to buy Bitcoin under $100, and now it's going to 100 grand. It's hard to believe that all of that can happen in 11 years. But that is just time. Time floats all boats. And there's other news that is kind of breaking. A lot of it has to do with kind of the macro situation and the fungibility of the US government. But Elon Musk says two things. First of all, he sees merit in Bitcoin following Trump's speech at Bitcoin 2024. And he also warns the US of bankruptcy. So, of course, the US isn't going to go bankrupt. But technically, as I've said for years, if the US country was a company, it will be long bankrupt. And shout out to USA. Look what we just did. $35 trillion in debt, a new record high. This chart from Kabasi is hopefully alarming to some. US federal debt hits $35 trillion for the first time in history. It's now up $12 trillion since 2020. That's 50% in less than 4 years. Bonkers. Bonkers. This thing is going to the moon, which isn't a good thing because your dollar is going to be debased. Like, I used to call it a melting ice cube. Now it's like a melting ice cube on top of a heater. You turn around in 5 minutes, it's going to be gone. Just a little puddle of water left. And that's the reality. That's why we Bitcoin. Again, people are always saying, can you share with me a chart or something that will convince my friends to buy Bitcoin? There it is. I'll blow it up one more time. Show it to them. It is terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Bitcoin playlist will be here. And at the end of the video, let's get into some black hole data. Here we are. This is not day 133. We had day... Whoa, that screenshot's bad. Forget that. I forgot to update that. But here, the thing you have to look for, we are day 138 or 139, if I recall. Blackrock had a big red spike as well. They've had 3 big red spikes over the last 10 days, and they are stacking hard. This is what I call the third accumulation cycle. And remember, we have pension funds coming in. If I get them right in my head, it started with Wisconsin, then New Jersey, and then Michigan is the third one. And there's another 47 to go. They're all going to jump in. And that doesn't even include the pension funds from all over the world that need this asset to shore up their shortfall in their pensions. Let's check out the power series of money flows. Again, we're in the kind of like that third accumulation cycle. It's been steady Eddie. Coincidentally, the pink line, which is the power line, is exactly at 124, which was the net flow into the funds to yesterday. You can't make this stuff up. It's very bizarre. And 1,859 Bitcoin were taken from the system. It was a huge dump from Grayscale, but BlackRock bought 3,000 and only 450 are issued today. And the whales are stacking too. It's only a matter of time before this thing goes up. We just got to clear out those headwinds, clear out the FUD, clear out the risk of U.S. government selling or let them sell. Who cares? BlackRock will buy it all, as well as some select whales that are out there. And the Gox hodlers, well, it looks like 60 to 80% of them are just going to hold on and they're not going to sell. Let's look at Grayscale. The bleed is back consistently. $50 million every single day. Boom, boom, boom. This thing is just bleeding out. At least the rate at which it's bleeding out is a lot slower, but they haven't had a 0 day in quite some time. So that is the Bitcoin show today. I'll be back a little later today with Okta, talking about all the stock, crypto beyond Bitcoin, a little bit of Bitcoin stuff too, and macro stuff, and how things are a lot more frail than they appear. Thank you all for coming. Have a great day. Thank you as well, Preston and K8 and Sean Donnelly and TND Tesla, you wonderful moderators, and everybody else in the chat. Enjoy the show. Bye.